I almost think he was maybe a Japanese cannonballer. I did not grow up in Florida. I grew up in one of them northern states. It's part of New England. Some people think it's part of Canada. And up there, we get a lot of snow. Growing up there, you actually start to enjoy it. When there was a chance of snow on a school day the night before, I would pack all of my ski stuff into the truck and wake up at the same time as I would for school and hope and pray that school was canceled. And if it was, I would immediately jump in the truck and drive through the unplowed snow to take advantage of the fresh powder at the local ski resort, if you could call anything in Maine a resort. So I learned to drive in the snow and to enjoy it at an early age. And so, of course, living in the Midwest, I always laugh at the people who promptly forget every year how to drive in the snow and decide to create massive pileups every year the first time we get a slight dusting, and pretend they're from Atlanta or Texas or something like that. All that to say, in all of this driving, there has become the pursuit for the ultimate winter vehicle. And I came close when I had a 2006 Subaru Legacy GT Wagon. The all-wheel drive in that car is awesome. The car's essentially built in New England, except it's built in Japan. But they actually built an LL Bean edition that they only sold to New England clients. So Subaru and New England have a tight relationship. And that was a fantastic car. I was so confident in its abilities, even on all-season tires, that I tried to drive up a mountain trail once in the winter. And I was like, no, it's cool. My grandfather owns this mountain, which he did, but it was also like watched over by this cranky old neighbor. He, I guess, called the cops on us. And it was this just big story. And I still can't live it down every time I go home to visit my grandparents. One member of my extended family is like, hey, dog, you gonna try to drive up the mountain again this winter? So it's this big joke, but that was a really fantastic winter car, and I had that for a few years and sold it. And then I needed to get a winter car that also had good towing capacity. And so I found myself with a Volkswagen Touareg diesel. That was amazing. One of the best all-around vehicles I've ever owned. The only problem was I could not disable the stability control. And of course, I like to hoon it in the winter, and I couldn't slide that thing around. I took it to Volkswagen dealer. I called tuning companies. I did endless amounts of internet research. I had somebody call Germany for me. Like everybody, all this research, nobody can do it. So I'm thinking, all right, what is the ultimate winter car? What is the best car out there possible? And the criteria was it had to be manual because I'm nuts for sticks. Had to be all-wheel drive, but it couldn't be like heavily front biased. I had a Golf R for a bit, but it was just, you couldn't really drift this thing very well. It had to be a station wagon because station wagons are the greatest. You can put dogs and drum sets and all other sorts of things in them. And my wife hates station wagons, so that will ensure that she won't be caught dead driving it. And it has to be just like awesome. So I was thinking, oh yeah, and it has to have nannies that you can completely shut off, which for a lot of manufacturers eliminated anything after like 2008. Like there are some fantastic cars out there, but couldn't drift them. So S4 Avant was a consideration. Volvo V70R was a consideration. Both of those got eliminated because of their maintenance concerns. It was essentially almost Ferrari style maintenance on those. And given how hard I was going to be driving the car, I'm like, if this is happening to people who are really caring for their cars, probably not going to be ideal for me. So I finally settled on the Audi RS2 Avant. And I had known about this car, but when I first kind of thought about it, I'm like, I can't import it for like 3, 4, 5 years. Doesn't do me any good. Well, by the time I had gotten rid of the Touareg, we were about a year away from being able to import it. So I started looking overseas to try to buy one before the prices jumped for the US market. And I found one actually in Japan as a result of going over there for a missions trip, actually. I made a contact there, and he was into cars, and he helped people source cars there and export them. And he knew of one that was not perfect. It wasn't like Ed Bolian quality, but it was it was sufficiently mediocre for my planned usage. So it was about 8 months away from being able to import it, and I bought it and just had it stored over there. And as soon as the 25-year exemption came up, which is the DOT exemption such that any car not produced originally for the US market can be brought in without any modifications after 25 years. So as soon as that was up, I'm like, all right, I can bring it over. Now, the Audi RS2 was similar to the Mercedes 500e. It was developed jointly between Audi and Porsche. Porsche was struggling for money a little bit, and they were subbing out their engineering services and manufacturing as well. So it was actually built in the Zuffenhausen plant. It has Porsche badges all over it. Porsche put their treatment on the engine. It's a 5-cylinder turbo. It's 325 horsepower, I think. All-wheel drive, 6-speed manual, 0 nannies. It has Porsche wheels, Porsche brakes, Porsche engineered suspension, and it is really the Porsche wagon. It is probably one of the greatest cars of all time, and it was the first in Audi's RS lineup. They've made many iterations since then, but that was their first one and probably their greatest ever. And I talked to a lot of different big-time collectors who had owned these cars, and they all loved them. Oh, man, that was a fantastic car. It was bulletproof, never had a problem with it. One of the greatest cars I ever owned. And one of these guys had 300 cars in his collection. Multi-billionaire, and he couldn't say enough good things about the RS2. So I was really excited to receive it. Importing it was a total pain because most of the companies who promise that they will handle absolutely everything for you will do almost nothing for you. And that proved to be the case. There's a number of ways to bring cars over. You can do what they call ro-ro, which is roll on, roll off. You don't get a dedicated container and there's more risk. You can rent a container, 20-footer, or you can just air freight it. I chose to go with the container shipping because I wanted to make sure I was properly insured and the car would arrive free from damage. Initially, I had been quoted about $5,000 by one company to handle pretty much everything, not including the actual taxes. So when you import a car that was not manufactured in North America, it is a flat 2.5% duty when you import it of the purchase price. So this other company quoted me like $3,200. I'm like, well, I'm not paying $2,000 more for this guy. That's way too expensive. Well, turns out that he was the cheapest in the long run, and he would have actually handled everything properly. All said and done, I think it cost me $6,500 plus the 2.5% duty to bring it in. And my contact in Japan, who handled the deregistration and the export from Japan, said that that was actually the most expensive he had ever seen anyone be charged to get a car from there to the US. And he had referred multiple people to this company before. So he was very apologetic. But flat rate from Japan, at least with this other guy who I wish I had used, I think was $5,200. Obviously from Europe and some other companies, it's less, mostly because the overseas shipping is a lot less. It doesn't have as far to travel. So I had to kind of manage the whole process and found out when the car was halfway across the ocean that it was not insured. So I had to pay for insurance and was thankful that it hadn't sunk yet. Once it actually got here, it was super easy. They didn't even inspect the container. So it just showed up, went right through customs. And I found out a few months later when I actually got the title translated from Japanese that I had imported it 4 months early, I guess, because they go off the manufacturer date or the original registration date, not just the year of manufacture, they go by the month. So customs had cleared it in, I think, March, and it was manufactured in July. So, it was kind of a nice bonus having it here early. But of course, it went straight to the service shop and this and that and getting ready to drive. But it really didn't matter all that much other than like social media accolades. And as far as I know, it was the first one officially imported to the US. There were a few others here, but they were here on European plates by dual residents who brought them back and forth and all that. So that doesn't really count because that's not fair. I'm just starting driving it now, and it is absolutely one of the greatest cars ever to drive. The thing is so responsive. You can tell it was built by Porsche. It is very mechanical. you feel absolutely everything, which I like. I mean, it's like a GT3 wagon, if that could be the case. And I'm finding little evidence of the previous owner in there. The key came with a bunch of jewels on it. It's bedazzled, and there's a bunch of electronic equipment in there. I almost think he was maybe a Japanese cannonballer, because I found an electronic toll thing and a radar detector and some aftermarket gauges and a bunch of extra power plugs and things like that. So I'm like, I wonder what story this car had previously. But I guess VINwiki hasn't made it to Japan yet, or if it has, people are not posting about their RS2 wagons just yet. So I'll have to start the story of it on there, and I plan to rally it out. And I've already put Blizzaks on it, and I'll put some big rally lights and things like that, and pretty much just piss off all the purists that buy theirs to put it in the garage and take it to car shows in the summer. But that's what rear wheel drive convertibles are for. I bought an Audi Quattro built by Porsche, and I'm going to use it as intended.
Shrewd negotiation starts with finding the right car, and the best way to do that is with Autotempest.com. Autotempest allows you to search nationally through all the major listing sites with one search. Autotempest, all the cars, one search.